first video game I ever owned was Metroid for the Nintendo Entertainment System. It was a gift from my father, if I recall correctly, who at that time was just no longer part of my life. He and my mother had divorced a couple years prior. Now, just 25 years later, I've decided to force some introspection, if you'll allow me, on that convergence of video games and childhood. It's a convergence that I think a lot of us share, so please join me on the therapy couch for a few moments. The therapy couch of your mind. I'm not actually going to lay down on a couch. I have one right over there, but I have to reset the camera setup. I don't feel like doing it. First, and go with me here, it's possible that Metroid and myself both came into existence in similar ways. Video game creator Yoshio Sakamoto had stated that when developing 1986's Metroid, he approached the project with simplistic movements for the game's protagonist already in place, that being jump, run, and shoot. Pretty simple. My father, never one to really care about the gratification of others, frankly, nor one to welcome responsibility, obviously, may have handled the experience of creating me with similar movements, though surely in a different order. Shoot, jump, run. Sorry. It's probably important at this moment to explain that my father had a problem with cocaine. This statement is based on my own vague memories of white powder and mirrors and razor blades, blended with the equally vague asides and slipped tales from my mother. Now, I shouldn't blame him. He was born with the infamous Ross nose, which is identified primarily by enormous nostrils. I'm talking holes big enough to store an 8-ball inside, both the pool kind and the drug kind. Probably simultaneously, I would think. Very big nostrils here. The way I see it, considering the awe-inspiring size of this genetic abnormality, he was obligated to stick something inside there, and if not hot dogs for some awesome-sounding contest, might as well be drugs, right? Tall guys play basketball, smart guys cure diseases, and tepidly accepting fathers with holes the size of military battle wounds in their face snort drugs. That's pretty simple, right? It makes sense. That sort of domestic complexity would not have worked for a video game plot in the mid-1980s. Tactile simplicity mattered. Shoot, jump, run. Emotional simplicity mattered too. I mean, shoot, jump, save the planet. I mean, we as a culture didn't yet have the ethical flexibility to render domestic misconduct in 8-bit graphics. No, that wouldn't become popular until the 1988 port of Double Dragon, when kids the world over witnessed a female getting gut-punched within the game's first 10 seconds. Ugh. It's painful to watch, especially these years after, I think, but chivalry is simple, I suppose, which probably explains why so many early generation games rely on it for plot momentum. It doesn't excuse it, just saying. It's easier to rescue Princess than figure out how the princess's family helped her become who she is, and then get into a long courtship with this princess, only probably realizing later that you and the princess weren't really meant for each other, and then having to basically relive your youth, but in an older, more frail body that isn't as attractive to the sex that it's just easier, okay? So that's where my creation and the creation of Metroid separate for now, though. We'll jump back on the therapist couch in a few minutes, I promise. The video game industry at the time of Metroid's release in 1986 was just coming down from a 3-year, financially disastrous party binge, suffering revenue drops from $3.2 billion in 1983 to about $100 million in 1985. Now let me explain this for you. In today's terms, this would be the equivalent of going from a lot of money to not a lot of money, okay? You're welcome for that explanation. This market downfall, dubbed the Atari shock in Japan, the video game crash everywhere else, and the "it's not my fucking fault" in Howard Scott Warshaw's brain, understandably forced video game developers to reevaluate their futures. Quick aside to explain that joke, because I don't think you're laughing nearly as hard as that joke warrants. See, Howard Scott Warshaw designed the movie-based E.T. the Extraterrestrial Atari video game, which is considered one of the causes of the video game crash. Warshaw was pressed to develop the game in only 6 weeks to ensure production in time for the 1982 Christmas season, which disappointed children the world over, remember, as the magical day they stopped believing in Santa Claus. This video game crash, I like to pretend, because I'm an egomaniac, is the primary reason Metroid does not dive fully into the world of coke addiction, and therefore does not fully fuse my childhood with the video game. I can't blame Nintendo for instead going the old tried and true route of guns plus space equals fun. Besides, what sort of late-game boss could accurately represent my adolescent years anyway? The battle between Zit Boy and Angry Shaft culminating in a level 9 climax in the Masturbatorium? Actually, I'd play that game. I'd play that game. I'd play that game until I got hairy in the palms. If you know what I mean. Of course you do. Come on. It's not like the industry wasn't familiar with drug use. By 1986, we already had Pac-Man, a game whose primary objective is to choke down enough pills to not only see ghosts, but to attempt to eat those ghosts. Don't tell me drugs aren't involved in that. And let's not forget the most famous video game character ever, Mario of Super Mario Bros., constantly gobbled down Amanita muscaria mushrooms, a fungi known for causing the perceptual phenomenon micropsia, which causes objects to be perceived as smaller than they actually are, thus giving the user a sense of being larger than normal. Mushrooms in the Super Mario Bros. Games, of course, cause the player's character to actually grow larger. Additional side effects include increased stamina, crashing through brick walls, and suffering 31 levels worth of blue balls while a toad person flips you the double bird. Yeah, what a jerk this guy is. Jesus. Drug use in video games had to remain subdued and subliminal. I get it. Video games were a product created by an industry that at the time catered to children. Though video game aficionados, as I was eventually to become, sensed something grand with the medium, the industry and consumers alike at the time sold and bought home console video game systems as toys. They were Christmas gifts. They were rewards for perfect report cards. And, in my case, they were rare token gestures of obligatory paternal affection. I was okay with that. I got to play Metroid. Video games were, by necessity, due to hardware limitations, simple enough for a child. Jump, run, and shoot. My father was, due more likely to software limitations, also simple, and his priorities equally so. Shoot, jump, run. That was a lack of intelligence joke, by the way. I explain it here as an aside in case you also have software limitations. The original Nintendo Entertainment System home console was released in North America in 1985. I was 3 years old. My mother and father were already many miles mentally deep into their divorce. It was years later, I was 10, that a package arrived at the trailer home where I lived with my mother and two sisters. Even stranger than the appearance of an unexpected package was the identity of the sender, my father. Now, years later, my mother would say that she doesn't remember my father being the one to send that package, but that's how I remembered it back then, so that's how I'll just continue to remember it today. By that time, my father had become, and I had accepted him as, and perhaps even preferred him as, a rotating gift dispensary with odds not unlike a post-beer binge dump. I didn't know when to anticipate the arrival, but when it happened, there was usually a token reward and relief despite the general unpleasantness. It's often difficult for children of complete families to comprehend how easy it was for me to cut myself off from my father. Sure, for the first 10 years or so, during his total 2 visits, 12 to 13 phone calls, and 1 mysterious package delivery, I questioned the separation as any child in my situation might. I wondered who was to blame for the separation. I wondered if we'd ever be a family again, but truly, and though my mother may have a different story, I don't recall ever actually missing him. I somehow understood that he was a bad man with a history that I didn't want to be a part of. He was a villain. My mother was the hero. Simple as that. But these simple role assignments did not prevent me from accepting the villain's gift. Coincidentally, that gift spawned what would become one of the most enduring loves of my life, video games. For a while, my career aspirations actually involved designing video games. I was obsessed. Though the obsession died down considerably over the subsequent years, I eventually, just a few years ago, succumbed to the nostalgia bug and purchased an NES. One of the first games I reacquired? Metroid, of course, and I'm still terrible at it. God, I'm terrible. This, of course, begs the question, is my father somehow inextricably linked to video games, and therefore my obsession is an obsession with him? Let's jump back on the therapy couch for this one, shall we? Though it may be true in an armchair therapist kind of way that the NES equals father's love, but I feel like I'm old enough and I feel like I'm rational enough to disassociate my affection of the video game console with any lacking paternal affection. This is perhaps why it's so interesting for me to look back on that very first game, Metroid, and attempt, though albeit forcefully attempt, to extract psychology from my admiration of Metroid. So let's do that right now.
Try as we may, we are never quite able to leave them behind.
Metroid is considered by many to be one of the most difficult NES games. It's not Ghosts and Goblins difficult or even Contra difficult, but neither is it a walk in the Sarah Parker's Pool Challenge. I don't know if Sarah Parker's Pool Challenge is difficult or easy. It's just the only game that has the word park in it that makes any sense at all for this joke, so please bear with me. One of the main reasons the game is so difficult is that it lacks an in-game map, leaving the player to spend most of the game aimlessly wandering through mazes and corridors that aren't often distinct enough to make the necessary spatial impression to a young yet not fully cognitively developed boy. It's poetic, I suppose, that aimless wandering and a general in-over-your-head mentality pervades the very game that a deadbeat father gifted to his 10-year-old son 5 years post-divorce. Metroid's simple, empty opening tune is the first thing that comes to mind still today when I try to explain the meaning of dirge to someone. Unlike the general kid-friendly upbeat peppiness that most games were able to create, even given the console's hardware limitations, the Metroid title theme insisted on being defiantly and objectively haunting. I'll play a few notes for you here. Okay, go hug your dad. Given Metroid's difficulty level, the only way I was ever able to really squeeze any enjoyment from the game was to use a cheat code. Fatherhood is difficult too. I suppose then I can't blame my father for attempting to use the give the kid a video game cheat code to make up for bypassing all that pesky child-raising crap. The Justin Bailey cheat code is certainly one of the most well-known in all of video gamedom, ousted perhaps only by the Konami code. But where the Konami code usually rewarded the cheater with more lives by which to have a better chance at beating a video game, the Justin Bailey code effectively allowed the player to explore the planet Zebus as a post-war tourist with only the final boss remaining, meaning you're not playing a game anymore, you're exploring the aftermath. Essentially, it's a stupid cheat code that serves only to grant the lazy player a facade of accomplishment. Similar to post-natural disaster political photo ops, I guess. I don't like sports, I can't drive a stick shift, I don't eat that much steak, and even today I'm not sure if I'm shaving correctly. By the looks of it, I don't think I am. I'm not the stereotypical man. How appropriate, then, that the video game gifted to me by my father would be one famous for having a female as its playable character. Female playable characters weren't new in 1986 when Metroid was released, but they definitely weren't common. Scarcity alone isn't what makes Metroid's female lead unique. Rather, what makes Metroid special is that the player is never made aware that Samus Aran is a female. In fact, it's only by either one, beating the game in less than 2 hours and seeing Samus bikini-clad as a reward, or two, using the Justin Bailey cheat code, that a player is ever encouraged to consider a pixelated vagina. To a video game feminist, this downplaying could be positive in a the sex of the character is so unimportant that it's not worth mentioning kind of way, or it could be a weak way to make up for a decade or so of lacking female representation. I don't know, I wasn't too concerned with gender equality back then, so I don't really think too much about that. All I've got to say after all of this is that even if my childhood was just broken enough to let the influence of video games trickle in, I'm okay with that, because it ended up being a great thing for me. And I'm interested to hear from you. Do you have a strong childhood association with video games? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. I know a lot of you get tired of hearing people ask you to subscribe, but I'm going to still ask you either way. I don't care. And until next time, enjoy this picture of my son at 4 years old playing Super Mario Brothers for the Nintendo Entertainment System. It touches me to see this photo, and I hope it touches you as well.